My name is Steven, and this is In Focus by Seven Wonders. Today, Michael and I have Eric from Kegerreis on the show to talk about some of his experience working in digital marketing and also billboard advertising specifically. So thanks so much for joining us today, Eric.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for including me.
So first one's easy, Eric. If you just want to tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this business, and just a little bit about your story.
Well, so I was a English and philosophy double major at school. So I did not prepare myself for any particular application out of school. So what do you do with those degrees? Well, I went and started bartending, and it was in bartending that I got introduced to media through a live remote for a radio station. And then I got to thinking, I should write some copy for a radio station, and that's advertising. Well, that was a lost cause. Nobody really, you only get to write radio scripts when you sold the copy, sold the ads. But timing was such that I, through relationships, got introduced to a billboard company, and I was not at a position in my life where I had greater opportunities. So I explored it, and they made me an offer, and that was in Reading, Pennsylvania, for a billboard company called Penn Advertising, which was later bought by Lamar. And it was there where I discovered that my 2 degrees actually were quite perfect for advertising, especially billboards. Philosophy was the distillation of information down to a singular core item of greatest relevance, and English gave me the ability to articulate the value proposition. So they ended up being absolutely perfect for my career, and I fell in love with helping entrepreneurs market their businesses.
Very cool. And we can see some of the brands there in the background too, which is awesome.
Yeah, the Orioles are my favorite because they're my team, and to have sold the Orioles that one year was fantastic. So that was a big feather in the cap, as it were.
I'm sorry for their somewhat unceremonious exit from the playoffs this year.
Oh, painful.
The Phillies didn't fare much better, so it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, good. I love the Phillies too. Lots of friends who are Phillies fans.
Well, I was curious from your end, Eric, what you would say is the most interesting campaign you've done, billboard campaign.
You know, the ones that come to mind, and they're people behind the brands, quite honestly. There's a small pharmacy in Royersford, Pennsylvania. There's a lawn care company in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. There are State Farm agents in all over the state that we work in. I mean, to me, it's about the reaction. It's really why I do what I do, is to help people be successful. So to me, the most meaningful campaigns can't be separated from the people themselves. So I love people. I love seeing them find good value in a world where advertising, generally speaking, at some level has been largely disappointing. So to have people come back and really renew year after year and build friendships, relationships, and see their businesses grow dramatically, they are the ones that stay in my mind.
Cool.
That's a good answer, because I feel like whether you're working with a small, medium-sized business or a big corporate company, it's really about the relationships along the way that help both the collaboration be successful, but it's also how you start to extract information about what you think can be their value proposition to their customers as well. It's like, how can you put their personalities on display, so to speak?
At the end of the day, we're all doing this as a means to an end. Work is a means to an end. It's to go home to our families, to squeeze our puppy dogs, to kiss our kids goodnight, and the reality is that's what it's all about. And the relationships are there because the people care about the brands that they're representing. The work that they're doing is meaningful to them, and therefore it's meaningful to me. But the relationships of people stand the test of time, and because blockbusters go out of business, right? I mean, they just disappear at some level. So what are you in love with and really attached to the blockbuster brand? No, I mean, Netflix replaces that. So, but who is Sally Jones or Pete, Wazakowski that were part of the relationship where we were high-fiving on return on ad spend or great notoriety? And that's again where it comes back to.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about storytelling through billboard advertising. The purpose of this show is to talk about storytelling in brand building across all different formats. And billboard advertising is so unique in so many ways. There's this challenge to convey your message in 3, 4, 5 words and a picture or something like that. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like what have you learned and what is the process like?
It is the best place to begin your brand journey. Absolutely. If you really think about it, I mean, people have often taken their print ads and tried to shove them into billboards, and it never works. The reality is you should be looking at billboards with a 5-second interaction as your litmus test for your core brand storytelling, because that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of a necessity to remove unnecessary information. And most people don't do that. We want our cake and eat it too. We're consumers. We're accustomed to getting everything we want when we want it. And the reality is the billboard proposition, the actual opportunity, the trade-off for massive visibility, impossible to ignore, is that you have to simplify your story to its core elements. And I think that's why we're on the call today too, is that you really appreciated that particular challenge with 7 Wonders. And it's exactly what I really thrive on, is that collaboration, that discovery of and challenging brands to find their soul. I mean, because you've got 5 seconds to tell your story, and there's no changing that. There's nobody stopping on the freeway to read a billboard ever, so, unless it's stop traffic.
So that's so fascinating. It's very interesting to me that brand marketers who are taking existing media collateral, their existing campaigns, and trying to just apply it to the billboard, and that you said that doesn't work. But I wonder what that also teaches us about our existing media collateral outside of the billboard medium. Like, what advice can you give to a brand marketer who just wants to use the billboard framework to make their other media format campaigns better? Like, I think it's all about simplicity, right?
Sure. Well, there's not clean answers in this particular world, because media are tools in your toolbox. So you have to use the tool effectively and know what it is and know what it isn't. And sometimes a billboard's actually being deployed by a brand, certainly more sophisticated brands, to actually achieve a specific outcome, address a specific challenge. And it may not be their number one core value, but in the context of its actual storytelling, Google may be introducing the new phone, right? Or Verizon's introducing the new phone. And in that case, showing the phone itself may be the best use of out of home in that particular context. But if you're actually Bob and Pete's goldfish shop, and you're doing your first ad ever, very different story. You may be looking to address the most critical need of broad awareness in a crowded marketplace where there's not any awareness for your brand. And that could be the starting point. And then you should absolutely take it very seriously and begin from a billboard standpoint, because you're kind of growing a business from scratch. So it really depends upon what the maturity of a brand is critical in its application of billboards, as well as what it identifies as its core outcomes, the critical outcomes that they desire.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, can you expand on that a little bit? Like, as someone who's been in the billboard advertising landscape for your professional career, what have you learned from that medium that you think could apply to brand marketers not working in that medium? Like, if they're working with digital tools or Facebook ads or Instagram ads, things like that.
I came up with a little acronym and some teaching that I've done at some schools and classes over the years, and I roll out with those that are asking questions like this. It's called MAKE IT, which of course nicely aligns with the idea of an entrepreneur making it, right? So M stands for message, A stands for audience, K stands for know the value, I stands for impact, and T stands for timing. So message is critical in the sense that you have to understand what is the single most influential message that has the greatest benefits to the business. That's going to be an outdoors responsibility and framework that's necessary for somebody to really identify. Audience is key, because if you're selling hamburgers to vegans, that ain't going to work. So, I mean, understanding expectations is pretty key with audiences, and knowing, again, what actually persuades them. Know the value is compare your cost per thousands, because as you decide that there might be a singular message that's influential, and I think about Tickle Me Elmo's back in the day, which you guys probably, precede your time, but this is the hottest toy since sliced bread. So it kept, not that sliced bread's a toy. So it came out during the holidays and you couldn't get it. So scarcity was such a significant factor that awareness was all that was necessary. Use cost per thousand as your evaluator to put out awareness messages, where all it takes is awareness to get the job done. When you're selling bottled water coming off the desert, same thing, right? But when you're selling something more sophisticated, it's not just cost per thousand. It might be what you're actually doing to try to persuade and influence. The I stands for impact. So a message that's, hey, come buy my stuff. It's pretty good. Like, that's not going to get it done in a crowded marketplace. Impact may be necessary to really be a dramatic, persuasive element of that and make that choice. Timing. If I just ate, I don't want to eat. So it's not going to matter. If you just pass my exit, I ain't turning around. So as well as radio ads and the whole 9 yards, timing is key. It's recency, in advertising, which is the closer an ad is to a point of purchase, the greater influence it will have over a purchase decision. So that kind of framework is key to understanding what someone wants to look at. I would say the obstacle is the way is really the encouragement I use to brand marketers across all mediums, because billboards insist upon that. And I think that there's still a lot of colossal waste in advertising when people are misaligning opportunities with tools in their tool bag to use them inappropriately when they really don't understand what's necessary. Are they trying, from a full funnel experience, are we looking at awareness? Are we looking at persuasion? Are we looking at conversion? Are we looking at efficiency, effectiveness? Like, all of these things are really key. And I see people really losing their way and not getting back to basics and saying, oh, we're going to build a shed. So let's pick the automatic nail gun to frame out the lumber. Like, let's pick that tool and use it appropriately.
I love that make it framework. I can see the infographic now that has the acronym spelled out. I think that's great. I think it's also a good segue into our collaboration, and I'll give a little bit of context to the viewers. So several years ago, when Eric and the Seven Wonders team got introduced, we had this opportunity. We were doing some video work for them and had the opportunity to do some billboard advertising via their billboard on I-95. And it was a really interesting experience for us, because billboard ad is not the typical way a video production company would get attraction from clients, but it was an interesting exercise that we wanted to do just to learn about that process. And it really forced us to refine our offer, like exactly the way that you were saying. And we had some success with it. It wasn't, we didn't measure some great uptick. I think ultimately, probably because we didn't adhere to your make it principles. And at that time, we didn't have a productized version of our offering that was able to fit into those make it principles. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. What was your experience working with us, like on that billboard, and how does that exemplify what you do with other clients as well?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it was a fantastic experience. I mean, I really came away appreciating your team, and my gosh, the video is top shelf. The CEO of our company came to my office years later, and he goes, "Why aren't we using this video more often? This thing's incredible. Like, I just found this again." I'm like, "This is incredible." I'm like, I know. So first off, it was a phenomenal collaboration. And secondly, you guys went and got a photo shoot. I think you did everything you could given the circumstances in which you were, put in, per se. At the end of the day, when you're really looking for an experience that takes consumers from A to Z, and the judgment of success is new business opportunities out of it, then that's a challenge because you got 5 seconds to tell that story. And the decision for videography is a multi-channel approach, right? They're coming in all through different. They're coming in different places. They're making decisions at different times. Circumstances have to align, and the billboard experience does not take people the whole way through that funnel. It needs to really be focused on one particular thing. I don't think you did anything that was at odds with it. I think the thing that I would do differently would be a digital campaign to combine that. And I think you're right to say that being able to leverage a particular product offering is pretty key. If you're like, turn right at the light, biggest ball of yarn you've ever seen, right? So that works very, very well. You hungry? There's your favorite restaurant, 2 exits, 2 miles down the road. Like, these things are very, very powerful. And it's not just billboards or directionals, but they have to be speaking to the right particular item that is the blockage. And by removing it, it leads to A gets to Z. And usually when you remove the blockage, it doesn't mean that you've created the full channel there. There's still other pieces of blockage that other media might need to do. And I hear all the time, like, a billboard, it didn't work for us. That's absurd. The automatic nail gun always works. So does the router. So does the saw. Like, at the end of the day, it comes down to when you're using it and for what expectations, because awareness is always a significant benefit. It just doesn't necessarily show up. And we actually see that because we have a digital marketing agency, and we get to compare and contrast performances with out-of-home as a support mechanism and without. And it's dramatically different. And it's why Apple, Amazon, and Google are all top 10 outdoor advertisers. The smartest tech companies in the world are using the oldest media technology out there.
Do you find, Eric, that brands that already have some sort of household recognition perform better on billboards, or have, like you're saying, a specific product to sell, like if it's a food product or a software company or a one-time purchase? Do you find that those are the companies that perform the best versus, like, hey, we're a service business?
We can't fix one-star restaurants, because if we say go to Eat at Joe's and everybody's like, Eat at Joe's has cockroaches. I checked out the reviews. They suck. Like, all the promotion in the world for brands that are weak or have not taken care of their customer service issues or have a bad user experience on their website. These are all brands that are looking for lifesavers in their media choices sometimes, and we can't fix those things. So to ultimately answer your question, Michael, we definitely see stronger brands performing better in out of home. They really crank up the rankings. They drive specific branded search, which improves algorithms so effectively in the back end that can lower your costs. We saw a program actually with a strong brand that was seeing weak response in Wyoming with a test that our CIO did one time. He lowered the client acquisition cost from like $140 to $8 because of billboard introduction, because of how powerfully it changed the Google algorithms locally for search. And that taught Google to say this brand is now relevant. So when, at the end of the day, the connective tissue between brand performance and user experience, as well as advertising, cannot be disassociated. They are intricately linked, and advertising's amplification is really what it comes down to. Advertising is not a lifesaver. It cannot fix broken brands that have not done the work that they need to do to improve user experiences or services or products that are deeply valued, and see that through clicks. At the end of the day, you can see a negative spiral with brands where they don't actually, the more advertising you do, the worse they perform, and therefore the costs continue to escalate. You see, like, it has to be in sync with a strategy for sure.
Like, what's the lesson from that, Eric? I mean, I'm sure there's several, but like, vet your clients, like, work with
well, know what you're really trying to do. Like, at the end of the day, you don't put in a professional driver in your race car if the tires are flat. So yeah, we on the digital marketing agency side, we're often putting a pause at the advertising because we're trying to amplify a brand that's not working. And you've got to first work. The lesson is there are no shortcuts, really. There's no shortcuts to building your brand. Like, you can try to do a sexy logo and you can dupe a person one time, but you can't ultimately fix something that is not satisfying a need in the marketplace or is banging its head against a wall due to other circumstances that you've not decided to really address. So yeah, that's the main lesson, is to be sure that you really understand whether you're poised for amplifying a brand message, or whether your real work is in actually creating a brand identity and awareness that, puts you in position to then later amplify it. So decide where you are in your brand maturity and apply the lessons as well as the tools in the right way at the right time, with the right messages to the right audiences, with the right impact at the right time. That was Make It, by the way.
I mean, and to what you're saying, it really, like any advertising, it's to get the name of a really good brand out there. If it's a bad brand, Billboard's not going to help it at all.
Yeah, it will always help. I mean, there's the question is what are you being judged on? And most small, mid-sized businesses, if they're not really going into the deep dive into testing ads and all the classic stuff that, or doing heat mapping on their website, if they are coming to a medium, a radio or print or TV or billboards, and trying to just use it as a lifesaver when they haven't done the back end work, then there's just going to be limited success with that. And it may be actually your starting point to say, you know what, we need to really just retool and start here and start saying new things about new ownership. Like if a brand's terrible, new ownership might be a fantastic message on a billboard, because now you're like, oh, well, their reviews aren't relevant. Why? Because, gee, the billboard had told everybody in town that we're now under new management. I've been wanting to give that place a try again, but I wasn't going to until I learned that, again, obstacle is the way. What's the real message of greatest relevancy? And let's focus on that. But that's Billboard's strength, and it can't do really much more than that. It can tell you your greatest specific opportunity in a moment. And sometimes that's turn right at the light. Sometimes that's we try harder, right? Or it's simple story, or the new Google Pixel phone's out. Like there's messages and timing that billboards really do incredibly well and far superior in terms of value than other ones. And they're not being chosen because we're trying to pull your automatic nail gun around an edge.
Yeah, that's so interesting you mentioned. I mean, not the new ownership component, but forcing you to reevaluate how you're positioning your brand in the marketplace. I think that is very much what our experience was like when we were trying to convey, okay, we started with just video production. We do video production. Okay, well, who do we do it for? Is it for corporate brands? Is it for fast going startups? Is it for, like, it forced us to really get to the heart of what is the pain point of the customer that we're trying to sell to. And then that carried through to all of our other digital marketing channels and how we're talking in sales calls too. Like, we need to hit on these pain points to make sure that the customers that we want to attract are hearing the things that they want to hear about our brand. And so the point about you can't amplify a brand that's not doing well, that's one aspect. But I think it's also, you might be doing something well, but you might not be talking about the right thing that you're doing well to the prospective customer.
Sure. 100%. Yep.
Another question I had, and I'm sure you get this a lot, Eric, in sales calls or prospective client calls. How do you measure success? Like, if you can't get a QR code digital ping because people are driving by a billboard too fast, how does that work in your world?
It really depends upon who we're talking to, because small, mid-sized businesses they're really overstressed, over-communicated to, limited with resources. They may not have a human resources department. They may not have a marketing department. And so the entrepreneur or marketer ends up being, wearing 20 hats, and they can't really spend the time to evaluate it. And then they're left with, well, we need to do something, and gee, it seemed like it was pretty good. You have to really be sure you know what that is. As I mentioned before, the client acquisition cost, you can study KPIs on digital, and this is a powerful trend. Out of home spiked pre-pandemic to a 19% growth year, when historically for 100 years it had been a 4%. That was because the smarter brands were taking notice of the power of out of home to affect digital performance, and it still does that. So that's an example of really, we want to improve our conversion rates. Well, we're going to use out of home to actually do that. And then you could actually study some, and you can easily isolate out billboards from what you're doing previously and then adding that into the mix. So A/B testing, multivariable testing is a luxury that most businesses don't get to deal with or affect or introduce strategies for. And that's probably a critical element to really studying the effectiveness of out of home in a thorough way that's deeply satisfying typically, because we see it all the time with our clients and integrated programs now. And the difference is quite telling when you have an intelligent strategy that's integrated and uses out of home correctly for the right particular message that's greatest relevancy strategically. But most people are typically saying, did you see it? Well, I heard about it. And that's the lion's share of it. And that can be quite satisfying. Realtors and insurance agents are big outdoor advertisers for good reasons. Every social party, every bowling group, every happy hour they go to, saw you on the billboard, So that's usually enough for those that have done billboards properly.
Sorry to cut you off. Was it I Love You Man, the movie, where they like put the billboard of the guy like as the realtor all over LA and like weird poses or something?
Yes. Well, Philadelphia has its own with I Hate Steven Singer, right? So at the end of the day, that's another powerful, what did they judge that success on? Did that sell me another client? No. What it did was it took you to a website and you were curious. You couldn't stand it anymore. You had to know. And they used curiosity as their leverage tool to get the name out there and then drive website visits. They've done that, right? And it's why they're now expanding it past Philly into all sorts of other markets. I see it in Harrisburg, and that's been a very effective strategy because it was cohesive and designed specifically around a unique outcome. And they said far less than what most brands typically ever say. But because it was so curiosity invoking and because it was so simple, yet still utilized the power of the name branding, they found success with it.
Definitely. And I feel like when we had our billboard, people were coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I saw your billboard."
Yeah,
that was a common occurrence.
I had a friend that I played hockey with at that time that would drive by that same route on I-95 every day for his job. And he said, I see it every day. And I said, well, we have full control over the creative on that billboard. I could put Eric stinks at hockey just one day on that billboard. I never did, but I thought about it. I thought about it just as a practical joke.
Oh man, that's a great idea. I love it. I've often said to people, I usually respond to people's doubts about out of home's ability by saying, how about this? I put a 4-letter swear word on a billboard in 8-foot high letters across, and it's got comments, questions. Call Pete at this number on your cell phone. So let's see how you feel about, that I-95 billboard had 170,000 cars a day traveling past it. It's insane, right? So how could it not be visible? The real thing is it's a crowded media landscape. We're getting 6,000 media impressions a day. So why are you going to put up a business card? And you didn't. I'm not saying you did. You had a solid billboard. But you recognize how much work went into actually designing that specific one, and that was challenging for you to then redirect all your energies. You didn't have a marketing department. You guys were. It's the classic bootstrapping of a business, right? So, yeah, and you're beyond that stage, but either way, you didn't have unlimited marketing resources to have somebody put up their 12 different messages, but you could have explored them and then could have studied which ones led to the strongest clicks. You could have employed curiosity. I mean, there's a lot of options, and the other example I use is a UFO. You put a big UFO like landing on the side of the road, like, oh my gosh. So a billboard has the ability to dramatically put a message that is shocking, surprising, curiosity invoking. You just have to have a plan to leverage that visibility in a way that has meaningful outcomes, of course.
Yeah, and your consultation through that process was instrumental in us figuring out exactly what we did want to say and also refining our own messaging for other channels as well. And so it was a really cool experience.
And I have to say, it was one of the better collaborations I've ever done, if ever, because you really listened. I mean, it was two people coming together that really wanted to lean on the other's expertise. And that is such a healthy, beautiful thing. And I see that actually really struggling these days, where people are not giving their counterparts in vendor relationships the opportunities. Like, everyone's working by email. Nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody really wants to collaborate. They're just like, yeah, send me the information and stay in your lane, because I got my blinders on, and then I'm going to go home after this, So, but you're missing the opportunity to not just build a relationship, but you're missing the opportunity to really lean on someone else's expertise. And it's quite significant these days. I just think that people are not really collaborating because of distrust or shortness of time, overwhelmed schedules. It's a shame, and it's something that I think people should really think about, because what a dumb idea to not tap into somebody else's entire work history and say, how can you best help me? Like, we don't ask those questions. We say, here's what you should do. Like, you stay in your lane and I'm going to tell you what to do. Like, that's dumb. That's completely stupid. So we should say, you're the expert. Guide me here.
Absolutely. Well, what would you say if you had to distill advice to brand marketers that they have a good product, let's say they have a good established business, but they want to really start marketing themselves and putting themselves in a more visible capacity out to the world? Like, what would you say is just general advice to brand marketers in those positions?
It related to billboard advertising?
Just in general.
Well, general.
Like, yeah, if they're exploring their possibilities.
I would say there's no shortcuts. I'd come back to that kind of piece of advice, is that all the advertising in the world is definitely amplification. And there's nothing, you can do more harm than good in advertising when you're amplifying lame brand propositions that have not been really thought through, and you haven't really understand what your unique position in the marketplace is. And a lot of folks struggle with that because they're like, well, we sell an average product for an average price. Well, then you better really work on relationship building, right? Because that you don't have a message worth amplifying, or it's going to be very inefficient and costly to do so, because the consumers will naturally gravitate to relationships in a lot of business opportunities. There's just so many businesses out there, and it's a global marketplace where you can get Fiverr solutions, right, for a song. So at the end of the day, I would say you just want to block and tackle, and don't think that you can find an easier way through the forest other than cutting a straight line with the right tools, and being focused on mission critical items, honoring promises, doing what you say you're going to do, and then making sure that the user experience is such that, because the bottom of that is such that it's very satisfying. The marketing funnel comes down to awareness, persuasion, conversion, various iterations of this, get down to loyalty and advocacy. Like, we live in a advocacy marketing world, and nobody is advocating anybody's business unless their experience has been fantastic. And so why are you going to, you're swimming upstream versus swimming downstream, and there's no comparison to the exertion and the sustainability of one pathway versus another.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, before you blast your message out to the world, make sure you're doing a really good service and have a really good product that's worth blasting out to the world. I think that's so key.
I've probably unsold as many billboard programs as I've sold them. If someone will call you up, go out there and meet with them, and then there's 3-foot weeds all through their parking lot. You walk in, the door doesn't really work, and then you go in there and you see the scum on the floor, and you're like, you want to advertise your restaurant? Why? Go clean up your parking lot, because, or especially there's this sushi restaurant that I used to drive by, and it had like 4-foot weeds all through the bushes in the front. That's fresh fish, people. That's fresh, raw fish. And if you're going to say that this is how you take care of your parking lot with your customers, your entrance, I don't want to see your kitchen.
I presume that you did not do a billboard blasting out there.
No, it's there's nothing you can do for that. Like, they had they paid for their visibility along the street, and they better, because nobody's coming there out of people advocating it at the bottom of the funnel. That ain't happening.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure speaking with you and learning a little bit about the insides of billboard advertising.
Loved it, man. I just love talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate your great questions and interest in what you're doing, because I think that you guys get it for sure. It's truly a wonderful experience working with you all, and I hope we have more collaborations.
Awesome.